Thank you all for making the time to be here this morning. This is our fourth day of the Open Symposium, and it has been such a great um, opportunity to share best practice from across our sector and beyond. It's actually been a total wonderful ride, a bit like a roller coaster. Um, Thank you, though. We know how busy everyone's work and lives are. Um, so my name's Mandy Charman. My name's Mandy Charman, and I'm the Senior Manager of the Outcomes Practice and Evidence Network. Wanted to welcome you today. It's a really especially exciting day today as we focus entirely on youth-centred programs and innovations. This youth-focused day was a late addition to the symposium, owing to the overwhelming number of incredible submissions we received through our EOI process, which is proof of the passion and creativity driving work in this area. And I can see this being an annual event for us, probably partnered with YACVIC and other really valuable youth organisations. First of all, we will acknowledge country, of course. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people joining us today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues, and the families we work and walk alongside. A little bit of housekeeping. This is, we're very familiar now with this, aren't we? This session is going to be divided into a keynote session and a series of shorter presentations, all which will have Q&As after the presentation's completed. So what we find is open your chats, and as you're listening, put any reflections into the chat, even if it's just appreciation for what you're hearing. This is really meaningful for the presenters who, I mean, frankly, we all know when you present, you really love to have people interacting with your ideas, particularly online, I think, because you can't see faces that easily. Also, of course, we really would love any questions, queries, or elaborations you want to us to engage the presenters in the Q&A. So that would be really wonderful if you do that. Please keep your mics off during the sessions. We are recording this, so as much as we'd love people to leave their cameras on, we understand if you don't feel comfortable doing that. Tech issues, we're very familiar with this, but new ones keep emerging, don't they? Try, first of all, leaving the room and coming back. We have people on the admission desk effectively, so you'll get immediately back if everything's okay. And the open team will put in a phone number for somebody you can contact if you do have persistent problems. Maybe just jot down that number right now, because of course, if you are having problems, you're not going to be able to get it off the chat, are you? It's sort of strange how it works like that. Okay, let's move on. We have some really lovely sponsors that have continued to support the work of Open and the Centre. VACA, if you were lucky enough to hear their session yesterday, ran a whole session profiling their work. Anglicare, CSNet, Berry Street Impact Initiative and WCIG. Thank you so much. Without that support and the ongoing support of the network, we wouldn't be able to do this amazing work that we are lucky enough to be able to do. Okay, the context for the day. As we move into today's discussion, it's crucial that we acknowledge the central role young people play in shaping the future of our communities. It's a bit of a no-brainer, really, but sometimes we get so busy thinking about other things. We need to refocus on this important area of our work. The voices of children and young people aren't just a nice addition to the work we do, they are essential. When we create opportunities for young people to participate meaningfully in decision-making, we empower them to lead change in the spaces that impact their lives the most. And frankly, the contribution they make in terms of the innovation of their thinking is invaluable for across everything, all our work. Young people are experts in their own experiences and in a lot more than that. They bring in valuable perspectives on the issues that concern them, from navigating complex family environments to building resilience in the face of social challenges like mental health, violence, and inequity. When their voices are heard, we are better equipped to develop services, policies, and programs that actually meet their needs. Young people are not just future leaders, they are leaders today. And this is going to be very evident in today's session. And by creating space for their voices to be heard and insisting that people stop and listen, we invest in a more inclusive, responsive, and resilient system that is equipped to support all children and families. Today's session will showcase innovative programs that engage young people at risk, support their well-being, and build their future potential and future innovations that are so needed in our communities. From mentorship to justice intervention, we have a diverse lineup of presentations designed to inspire, inform, and empower all of us working with young people. To help us in our first session today, we have our friends from YACVIC, Jen Rowan and Sam Champion, who work in YACVIC's hugely innovative youth facilitation program. Jen and Sam have kindly offered to facilitate the questions and answers for our first session. We feel very privileged to have guest facilitators, so thank you very much, Jen and Sam. Just a little introduction to them. Jen Rowan, I love this introduction, Jen. Outside of being a dog mum, a novice gardener, and the biggest fan to our hometown area, the Great South Coast, Jen is the Youth Participation Officer at YACVIC, where she brings a wealth of experience in youth engagement and youth participation. She holds a Diploma of Youth Work and is currently pursuing a Bachelor of Social Work. Sam Champion heads up YACVIC's youth participation and sector development work and leads the Youth Participation Practice Network. You probably might have heard of it, the YPPN, which is a free community of practice for anyone supporting young people in youth participation and advocacy roles. Last year, Sam coordinated the upgrade for the Youth Participation Resource, YERP, and the Code of Ethical Practice for the Victorian youth sector. We'll hear a little bit more from Jen and Sam about the important work of YACVIC at the end of the morning session. And now to our first session, where we'll hear from Dan Donoghue and Lamissa Shah, who will be speaking about youth participation practices through the powerful work of Project Rockit's National Youth Collective. Daniel Donoghue is the Manager Digital Innovation Project Rockit and Administrator National Youth Collective. Daniel has spent over 2 decades in the child and youth sector, advocating in collaboration with children and young people to help them play a greater role in the systems that govern their lives. Lamissa Shah is a member of the Project Rockit National Youth Collective and a student of the Bachelor of Arts, International Relations. Lamissa is a member of Project Rockit's collective. Her main goals are working on fostering collaboration and empowering marginalised voices. They are passionate about social justice and community support. Project Rockit is a collective made up of over 35 young Australians working alongside each other in their mission to eliminate hate, prejudice and abuse. Together, Daniel and Lamissa will share key insights into the importance of engaging youth voices to drive change as they continue to elevate the role of young Australians in shaping a more inclusive and supportive society. Over to you, Dan and Lamissa.
Thank you so much, Mandy. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate being invited. The session's going to run in 3 parts. I'm going to have a yarn for 20 minutes. Lamissa and I will then have a conversation together about the collective and then create some space for some dialogue and for people to jump in and say some things. I should share my screen, shouldn't I? That's what you do when you're doing these kinds of things. Here we go. Look, I haven't even put a title on the screen, but effectively the aim of this talk, and I think in the program we titled it something around it's more than co-designed or something like that. Just because what we're going to be talking about a lot in this first 20 minutes, I think is power. And is that idea that sometimes we begin to use language and we talk about things that we all don't fully understand. Like the reality of co-design is it's actually quite a radical concept. And it actually is, it's not just about being in a room and having post-it notes on the wall and doing those kinds of things. It actually means to actually allow marginalized voices or those who usually don't get to have not just to say, but actually be part of a decision-making process as part of that. And that's what co-design is really about. And I want to talk a little bit about the kind of practice that we have in the collective and things that have informed that so that you can get a sense of of not just like the frameworks and the models, but that the practice, like how we actually do this, is really important. So um I would also like to like recognize that I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Pay respects to elders past and present. And when we do these online things, I'm always fascinated and thinking about that, we are all coming from the lands of hundreds of different cultures of nations on in this land that we now call Australia. And when I guess I think about us being spread across time and space on all our computers connecting in this way, like I think about how we within a Western context view, time and space and how we have commodified time and how that means we have concepts like wasting time, um, that we don't value, that maybe we should value more. um, and it informs our productivity and possibly even the stress and all the kinds of things that we place on ourselves. And it makes me think of reading Tyson Yunkaporta's book Sand Talk, and that opening my world to this idea of knowledge systems that I hadn't really engaged with much before, and realizing that there's not just Indigenous knowledge systems, but there are lived experience knowledge systems, and the knowledge systems of children and young people themselves are their own kind of way of thinking and existing in the world. And when you look at that, you realize that there are so many people in the world who understand and exist in that world differently. And someone like me, particularly someone like me who lives in a world where the systems were made and created by people like me for people like me, it means I can be very much blind to that. Like you don't know what you don't know. You live in a certain system, and that's what I think I try and bring all the time to my work with children and young people, and recognize the privilege that comes from that. And I learnt that from this woman, Lauren Oliver, who, it would have been over a decade ago when I first met Lauren. But then when Lauren started doing work, setting up Berry Street's Why Change program, which is, I think still stands out as one of the most innovative and really interesting ways of trying to understand what it means to get young people to participate in the systems that govern their lives. We were working together, and she had me coming in to work with the young people to do some sort of reflective work and some evaluative work on what they'd been doing. And these are young people, if you're not aware, from Why Change, who are coming in and working, and they all are coming from an out-of-home care background. They're coming from, say, from YSAS, so drug and alcohol services, or a range of different tertiary type services. These young people have usually experienced a high level of trauma. And I got there at 10, which is when Lauren said to arrive. And I said, great, well, when are we starting? And she just said, we start when everyone arrives. And, think about the time thing I was just talking about. Like in an adult world, it's like, oh, the meeting starts at 10:30, we'll definitely be starting then. But Lauren was teaching me that actually we're working with a group of young people that for whom traveling and finding their way to the Richmond offices and to getting here and to making their space, like that real sense of like you just don't know what's been going on in someone's morning. Um, when you see them, you don't know what trials and tribulations they've had to get to where they are to be spending time with you. And that was a real eye opener. And I try and bring that that idea to my practice all the time. We start when everyone arrives. And Lamissa and I might talk a little bit about that in regards to the collective too and what that means. So yeah, it's one, and one because nothing's actually more important. Why have one, two, and three? But the three things we're going to be doing are provocations around practice, and that's me having doing this now, what I'm doing. Lamissa and I are going to have some conversations about Project Rockit's National Youth Collective and what that's about. And then we look forward to having some questions and hopefully getting some of your ideas and having a bit of a further chat. So this is me. Of course, that's my work photo. Like there's heaps I want to say, but you can Google up my background and see other stuff I've done if you need. And actually, that's not as important. The book sort of is important, and it's not important because I want you to buy it, because it was published a long time ago and it's out of print. And if you want a copy, you probably can get one for $2 on eBay or something like that. But as a relatively naive young person that was not even yet 30, I was given the opportunity to put down a whole range of ideas around what does it mean to be child-centered or youth-centered in our practice, and that became this book, Idolizing Children. And the reason I show it is because the ideas in it still really fundamentally shape the practice that I undertake. And that practice is basically constantly pushing and pressing that idea of like, how do I see children and young people? Like, how do I bring a rights-based framework? How do I recognize that ultimately there's no reason why they shouldn't have the vote, right? Even young children, because all the arguments we bring to sort of saying that these children are developing and they are not ready to be part of the decision making process is exactly the same sort of arguments that we used when we decided that women, way back when suffrage was first offered to men, when we decided not to offer that to women. And then when we decided to offer that to not to offer that to other marginalized groups, and all the arguments that we put in place towards not having young people involved in that sort of level of decision making, when they live in the world and are shaped and impacted by the systems that govern the things like, oh, someone else will influence their vote, or they'll do that with, or, they don't have the capacity or fully understand things. Those are exactly the same arguments that have been used to deny other groups of adults the vote until we actually recognized that they had a responsibility for that too. So I'm not here to talk extensively about, lowering the age of voting, but it is the point of like, that is how decisions are made in our democracy. That is like a pure space of saying you are a part of this civil society. And there are still a group of young people, of people that we don't offer that to, and that they are under the age of 18. So provocations around practice, that was my first one. And I'm still really, I know there's other models that are evolving now, but I started when I started in this work. And when someone first introduced me to Roger Hart's ladder of youth participation, it's still the model that I go back to. And the thing that I love most about this is that the top rung of the ladder is youth initiated and shared decisions with adults. And the one down from that is youth initiated and directed. And I think that's really important for us to think about, right? Because what that actually means is that there is more power in young people and adults working together to achieve things than it is just allowing young people to do that themselves. And I think that's really important. You know, I've got down there more important than co-design because too often we use the concept of co-design, I think, to get young people to do the work adults should be doing. And then we don't even fully act on the things that they say anyway. Agency is not actually about young people making the full decision. Um, Young people don't necessarily have a whole bunch of knowledge that you need to make some of the decisions in the work that we do. They don't understand budgets. They don't understand restraints. They're not privy to a whole range of things that adults who have had further education and have just been existing in the world for longer have access to. So, you know, really solid and good participation is about young people being appropriately involved in the decision making that impacts their lives. And in practice, the way we do that is instead of saying, like, do you want to go to school or not? Or how can we make the school system better? Or here's a table of different things that we're thinking about. What do you think's missing? All questions that are sort of asking them to make a sort of a yes or no decision, or have knowledge that they don't have. We need to ask them things about their lived experience and then help make sense of that, right? So the question should be like, what makes it easier to go to school? Or what do you enjoy when you're at school? Or what makes school hard for you? We don't have to ask young people how should we make school better. Um, we ask them to describe the things that they really understand, and then using those answers that children and young people can give us about their lived experience and to improve their lives and the experience of the systems that govern them. We bring the other things that we know. We bring academic knowledge. We bring other lived experience knowledge. We bring knowledge from other cultures and other ways of being, right? Youth participation at its best is a really deep and rich collaboration with adults who understand the power that they hold. Voice, I know while we use student voice and youth voice, it's not enough. the theme of the conference, transferring futures, the symposium, like for me, is about starting that now to move beyond voice and every day. Like transferring futures is not just about listening; it's about actually handing over some of the power and some of the control in a supported way. You know, we're supposed to create spaces where young people can tell us and talk to us and all the rest of it, but we don't transfer that into action. If we don't find ways, tangible ways to give that voice power, then that's when we become tokenistic. That's when we spend a lot of energy and time talking and chatting and not doing. And that's tokenistic at best and manipulative at worst. And I think it's really important that it doesn't have to actually be big. So beginnings matter in relationship building. And here's a story from the National Youth Collectives to sort of give you a sense of that. Basically, in one of the first sessions we had, and it was more a broadcast session because we had 32 young people in a Zoom room from across Australia. It was the first time they were seeing each other. And one of those young people at some point held up a bag because they'd been engaged with Project Rockit before. And it was a little one of those canvas tote bags that had Project Rockit on it. And someone in the chat mentioned something like, oh, merch. And all of a sudden the Zoom room went crazy. And all these people like merch, merch, merch. And the chat sort of had all different types of merch that people thought would be good. And this was like the first time that I brought all these young people together. And I hadn't said to them, do you want merch or not? Yes or no. This had just spontaneously come out of a thing. And it was sort of seen as a bit funny and everyone was having a bit of a joke. But for me, I saw that as like, oh, hang on a second. There's a real opportunity there. Like these young people have said that they would like merchandise and they see value in that and got excited about it. I need to take that energy and do something with it. And for me, if I can actually not just listen, if oh, I could have done nothing, right? There was nothing that I'd proposed that said I would do that in the first place. They just brought it up. But by me responding to that, and then within a week, having a survey out saying, what kinds of merch would you like? And then within 3 weeks, having some designs on the table for them to consider and to help to sort of shape. And then within 2 months of them saying, oh, merch would be great, them getting a package in the mail that had, a beanie and some badges and pins and lanyards and other things. All of a sudden, what I was saying to the National Youth Collective was, I'm not just here to listen to you and every 3 months have a meeting for 2 hours where we have a chat about stuff. When you say things and when we think about things together, my job is to help you to realize that and make that happen. And yes, it was only the story of creating some merchandise, right? But actually, it's the action, it's the process, it's what we did. It was listening and responding with an actual action that actually I think helped and garnered trust. And we can ask Lamissa about that in a little bit. But and the other impact of that too is that then the sales and marketing manager at Project Rockit saw that and was like, oh, we haven't done merchandise and posters and things for quite some time. We should be doing that more. And so all of a sudden, the collective was in very early days having an impact on the organization because the organization itself saw a gap and decided that it should do something about it. And that all came from an action initiated by the voices of young people in our National Youth Collective. Now, relationships take time. It's why the National Youth Collectives model is one where we're not just saying, oh, this is an annual thing that you come to and all the rest of it. I'm not putting an end on when young people can start or, can end this. There might be something to do with age at some point, I'm sure, but I'm not sure why or when. Um, and and what I really want this sort of next little section to be to tell you about, and the story that I want to tell is that like the relationships come over time, but also through how you role model. And as adults in the space, having the humility to make space. It's important to make mistakes. And so we need to sort of make space for that and to create spaces where young people can take risk and we support that. Like early in well, I say early because it was probably about 12 or 13 years ago. I was doing a range of work for Billanook College. And I got to work with these year 9 and 10 students over the course of, say, 2 terms, which again was really good and sort of different at the time to have a project. Was actually funded through Yakvik actually because the college had got a Hay grant, which was to sort of support the students to do something around advocating for LGBTQI young queer people. And, this is in days, this is in the days before, marriage equality and all of those kinds of things. And the young people were really keen on doing a movie, and so we did that. We sort of helped them. We had some script writing. We did all those things. But the thing was, I was running late one time, sort of more than halfway through the project, and what I'd often do is they'd all be sitting around on cushions and stuff, and I'd have a whiteboard, and I'd be up the front, sort of writing stuff and doing all the rest of it. And I was running late, and I was like, oh, I wonder. And I've got to the room, and because of the relationship we built over time and the trust, I came to the room that they were doing, and two of them were up the front of the room and had the pen and were at the whiteboard and were basically just continuing on with the work and doing the meeting. Um, and it was that kind of experience for me that was like, oh wow, you know, I can I can get to a point where I model well enough and I do things well enough. Like I can actually step back. Like there's a lot to learn and understand in the way we model. And, you know, what I think that is about is humility. I think that's about we as practitioners recognizing that even if we know the answer, even if we think we know the answer, it's really valuable in stepping back and making space for young people to take over and come up with the answer themselves, or ultimately come up with a different answer that we can't come up with because we are not young people. You know, um, humility is not assuming that you have the answers, right? Or assuming that your answer is the best answer. And for me, in terms of our practice, that's really important. And it's really important because um, I'm obsessed with this concept, power literacy, and understanding our power and understanding where we sit in the intersections and what our privilege is. And being able to let go of that is such a really important part of how we work with young people. Um, and I've got I could talk to you all about power literacy and all the rest. I found the website that I usually go to for this has actually been closed down. So if anyone is interested in just me saying those two words and all the rest of it, find me online, ping me on email. I've actually downloaded the documents that relate to that little circular, and that's not new, that, our little wheel of privilege and intersectionality, but there's a whole workbook that goes with it that's really exciting and worth having a look at. The story I want to tell here, though, is about a recent one where I've been doing some work helping the Telstra Foundation set up a youth advisory council. And they wanted to be from young people from across Australia and obviously have as diverse representation as possible. And um, through their partners, they got connected to a young man called Isaac, who is 13, and a young Indigenous boy, First Nations lad, who is out in Western Australia, out around Port Hedland and Roebourne, and spends a fair bit of time on country out there, but also in town. And the reality was that we had a typical sort of model, which was like, oh, we have meetings online, you come, everyone comes, we, make it available, we let everyone know when it's happening and all the rest of it. And the reality is for Isaac and for his life, that just didn't work. Like he's in a household with five boys, he's not always on country, even if, they have one device, they have one iPad. And so who has access to it and when? They might not always have data. And what was clear was that even though we were saying that he was part of the collective, he wasn't. And that's when it becomes manipulative and tokenistic. And then that's almost co-opting Isaac's identity for the value of the Telstra Foundation to look like they're doing all the right things. So the discussion we had was either, well, we either say that we either remove Isaac and say Isaac's not a part of it, or I said we actually go to Isaac and we work out what our power is, and we recognize that his disengagement isn't on him, it's on us, and it's on the systems we've created to do that. And so what we actually need to do is actually have a chat. And so I'd had a few chats with Isaac's mum. So we talked to Isaac's mum. We worked out that the people that Telstra Foundation had connected him through was Big Heart, which was a program that Isaac had connected with. And we found out that on Thursdays he would often go to a digital sort of hub that they have in Roebourne. So through a range of conversations that took more resources than people sometimes would like, but that's just the reality of actually making sure that you understand your power and go. We went to where Isaac was. We connected with someone who could support him to connect with us on a Thursday at a particular time that suited him. We didn't bring the whole council to him because that could be overwhelming, but we asked a few of the young people, would you like to come and do this? And so we had two or three young people come, and we created a small committee, I guess, of this council, so that we could have the same conversations that the council were having, but have that with a smaller group with Isaac, where he wasn't going to feel as intimidated and could create the space for him and the culture that would work for him and how he wanted to engage. And that took a fair bit of time and a range of conversations and all the rest of it. But that's what understanding your power looks like, you know. It's about letting go and actually realizing that disengagement that we always talk about, how do we disengage young people? What we're actually saying is we've created systems that won't let these young people engage with us, you know, where we're at. You know, the reality is it's like we could actually flip that from a power perspective and say, well, why are we disengaged from those young people? Why are we not changing our practices and the way we work to actually go to them and find where they're at and create the space for that? Because the reality is safe spaces are so fundamental for getting authentic, real, meaningful, and just engagement, right? And for whatever reason, if a young person isn't coming to us, it could be, yes, that there's access issues, but in a large number of cases, it's because they don't feel safe. It's something they've never done before. It's a new thing. There's people they don't know. Um, we really need to challenge some of the ways we go about setting up spaces for young people to participate. Um, Curiosity, I think, is fundamental to our practice, and how we actually go about doing things. Like, you know, um, curiosity is the way of creating safety, because that's a positioning that you take as a practitioner with young people that's sort of like, hey, I'm not here to tell you what to do or do all the rest of it. I'm just going to ask questions like, who are you? What works for you? How are you feeling? What's going on? Like, and being open and not judgmental. Like being curious is a very much a non-judgmental space, right? Um, even before I'd written Idolizing Children. So this is way back in like 2005, 2006. I did some work for the New South Wales government for their community service sector and ran a New South Wales Young Parents Forum. It was based on some research that I'd done because I'd become a reasonably young dad myself. Not uber young, but 23 was reasonably young at the time. And I was sort of fascinated by the reactions that I'd gotten, that this was a decision I'd made, and yet people in a range of different ways, and even in services, but also people in public, really did not think that this was a good idea. Um, and I thought that was really interesting because it's hard enough to have a young child when you yourself are reasonably young, but then to have all that judgment and that stereotyped ideas around who you are. So um, and this was not even something that I necessarily had thought heaps about. It was just the process that I went through. And we ran forums in Albury and in Newcastle and in Sydney. And we put out an invite through all the different usual networks for young parents to sort of be involved. And when I say young parents, we did have a few young dads. It was mostly young mums, and they were aged between 15 and 21. Um, But I made sure that I spoke to every single one of those young people before on the phone. This was before Zoom and such things. Skype might have been around, but and I spoke to everyone who was coming, and I learned about them and their kids and what else they love to do. And that helped me realize a few things. That realized, oh, we were going to have to provide on-site childcare. We were going to do this. We were going to need to provide taxis and travel to get to the thing. For some young people that were outside of those areas, we were going to need to provide accommodation for them and for their children. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about a recent thing that had happened. I'd gone to my first conference and been at this really nice hotel, which had never happened before. And I realized that all those people in the hotel were trained to be nice to me. And it made me feel really good. So then the other thing is I went back to the New South Wales government and said, oh, these things we're holding, we're going to have to hold them in five-star hotels. And they were like, what are you talking about? And so we actually created these spaces where we had childcare centers set up, but sort of in part of the hotels, and we had concierges pushing prams and welcoming these young mums predominantly and a few young dads in a way that was really different. But it also meant that like that was able to happen because I was curious, because I made the effort to contact, to have a chat, to ask questions, to work out what were going to be the barriers to access and to find ways to overcome them. So, I think our core job within youth work and within youth participation is just to just be interested in people, where they come from, and realize that it's about them and it's not about you. So, looking forward to having a bit of a chat with Lamissa now. But I just wanted to hone in on five things that you can take away. Take away one if you want, take away all five. I think what matters when it comes to youth participation practices is time, is to reevaluate our relationship with time, to create more of it, to realize that things are going to take longer. And for us, it's our job to advocate into funders and into our organizations and into governments to realize that you can't do this quickly. And you can't do it quickly because relationships are not things that happen quickly. Oh, sometimes they can. You can have like a moment in time where you fall in love across the dance floor and stuff, of course. Not saying that, but actually authentic relationships with young people who maybe are vulnerable or don't feel safe or need to recognize and help find their power, that takes time, right? And if you're going to do that, you need to bring your own humility and understand your power so that you can take a position. The positioning that you take in your practice is really important. And that position has to be, I'm curious. I'm not here to tell you because I think I've got all the answers. I want to work with you to come up with the answers together and be really explicit to young people and tell them that. So I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen because there are other slides, but I don't know if we need them because Lamissa, unmute yourself and let's have a conversation.
Hello. Yeah, that was nice,
How are
Dan. That
you?
was really nice.
Were you enjoying that?
Yeah, always.
Oh,
I always
good.
find it interesting.
I do want to talk. I want to start. Can we start talking? Because I always loved hearing you talk about this. I love hearing you talk about we were at the moment at the Starlight Foundation, and you were talking about the fact of how the reason we seem to maintain the collective and they all seem to come along and we seem to have great time
Mm.
is because you feel like you don't have to always be there.
Oh yeah, like I think the
Yeah.
weirdest thing about it was the flexibility. Like I had done little bits and pieces in school to kind of have like, here, join this thing so we can hear your voice. Or even one of my mates who is Aboriginal, she had joined some Indigenous youth buddy thing at one of my schools. And so what had happened is when we had these conversations, is most of the time when we went to them, we felt like we were just talking to be there. Like our faces were just there because we existed and there was no real back and forth. And on top of it, it was really restricted. So we had to go in at certain times. And if we didn't make it, it's not on them, or there wasn't really any leeway. And so I like one of the first things when I joined the collective is we had discussed meeting times because all of us live in different time zones, regions, just different. We have different lives, very completely different lives to every single collective member. And I remember going to one of my meetings and the conversation was, we can't have them during the day. That isn't an existing thing. Most people my age or even younger don't have that time. We're either booked with school, we have things on the weekend. It's not a feasible thing to expect us to rock up at 9:30 in the morning to do a meeting with the National Youth Collective. So one of the first things we decided was that it was going to be late in the afternoon, or even night. Like we've had 7 o'clock meetings because that works. It honestly, it's like it's and I remember coming back from my first meeting at 7 o'clock and I'd walked out and my mom's like, "Are you in a meeting?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just like I just done one." And she was even shocked. And I spoke to my mates. I'm like, "What are you even doing?" Like that was most of the conversations I've had since I started Project Rocket was like National Youth Collective is what even is this? Because it's so unheard of. So yeah, no, I everyone in the collective is very much enjoys the flexibility. Like we've had people rock up to meetings in cars. Like, like that's it's just it's how it is, and I think that's how it should be, and it's amazing.
Well, and it's also, isn't it also too just that fact that um, you know, we've created a model where there's lots of different projects and you can be part of whatever project you would like to be a part
Mhm.
of.
Like
And
it's
yeah,
yeah,
go.
sorry, no, what you're saying.
And how people can dip in and dip out. So,
Oh,
like so everyone knows we've been doing the Shaping Our Feeds project where we're having young people having conversations online about the algorithm and what that means to them and how they use it. And then we get them to video themselves to create some resources afterwards. It's a bit of a practice that Project Rocket have sort of developed through a couple of things. But it's October, November. There's a bunch of people doing exams, a few
mhm.
people keen on their year 12 and they don't. And so they're able to just dip
Pop
out.
in, pop out, 100%. Like even before Meta, because we did that, that's like a big forefront at the moment. Even before that, we're running what, like 6 projects at once. because we had so many people, and like there was it was really funny in the WhatsApp. I accidentally joined most of all of the groups because I wasn't aware we had put this system in. But now looking at it, it was really interesting seeing like I wasn't a part of certain projects because I wasn't able to take on that much. And I think there are members that maybe only do one thing. Then there's members that are doing basically everything in one go because they have that freedom and flexibility to do it. And I think by how the youth collective is set up is flexibility is at the forefront. And I think because it's so important, people are more likely to want to come to these meetings. I've like the messages we get like prior to meetings if people can't make it is genuinely you can tell they're not happy that they're not able to come because it's you at the start it doesn't feel like we're working. At least to me it doesn't. Like it genuinely I'm here and I always tell my mates I'm like I'm getting paid to just like whinge. Like that, like that's what it feels like because I'm not expected, nothing's expected of me. And like my voice is so important that I sometimes forget that that's what I'm actually coming here for. Like it's just it's so wild because I haven't done anything like this before. So yeah.
And it's like that though too, isn't it? Like I just saw a thing pop up that said like how often do you have meetings? Like it's not a traditional youth advisory council. We're not having set meeting times. Um, the model is sort of like, we have a group of young people, there's 30 plus, and they'll be at different levels of engagement. Some of them uh, are involved in everything, but we have a number of different projects. And some of those projects we've been funded from Project Rockit to actually initiate. Like someone said, yes, we'll give you money to create some youth resources around bullying that you can then use in your workshops. And those might be video resources or things. But a lot of it, we've tried to create we had these brainstorming sessions in May to try and create space for young people to come up with their own ideas and for us to do that thing. Like, where's a youth initiated idea that we can deliver? And we did a session, didn't we? So like I talked about the vision and mission of Project Rockit around addressing bullying, hate, and prejudice. Like there's a boundary. It's not just anything.
Yeah.
But there's been some amazing stuff that's happened out of that.
Even then, that boundary is really funny because, like, we've been in heaps of meetings where we kind of, I don't know if it's just because we're young and we're inclined to do it, but as soon as you say that that's where we're stopping, people find ways to kind of push it. And I find that we find the best ideas that way.
That's
Like,
true.
one of the coolest things have come from people going, but Dan, can we like take it from this perspective? And they're the best ones, honestly.
Well, that's true. It was like, in one of those brainstorming sessions, I think you're right. Like Deshana started talking about books. They just started talking about
Mhm.
books, how they liked books. And we let that ride for a minute. And it all became about seeing people seeing themselves in books and movies for the first time. Like, and we had, Deshana, a young Tamil Sri Lankan woman, talking about, I can't remember the exact name of the book. It's something about tea time in Chinese gardens or something. Basically, it's written by a woman who grew up as a young Tamil woman in Western Sydney, and that's what the book's about. She was like, it was amazing, and had then young queer members and young members with a disability saying the same stuff. And so all of a sudden we were like, oh, we should do a book awards. And bang, a small group was formed. We explored that, and we met with the Victorian Premier's Literary Awards. We talked to them, and we actually then found some people in Queensland were already doing it. And the Australian School Libraries Association have these disability book awards. So we're in conversations with them about the collective, advising them as a group of young people on how they can do it better and how we can support, right? We've had a group talk about, look at our social medias and our blogs. We've had them advise us that our social media is too millennial, evidently, and we need to shift it. But also they're going to take over our blog. So we're in a process where the collective are coming up with plans, and there's a whole basically editorial committee that's doing that. So it's not about going, let's have a meeting every month and just chat about stuff that Daniel's come up with. It's about what spaces are we making to do things.
Yeah, no, that's what they're all like. It's really funny. Like I know you start a lot of the meetings and it kind of opens the air, but like the other week, what Noah came in and basically pushed you to the side and was like, I have something to say. And that honestly, they're the best. I remember when we talked about the blog. That was such a fun, like I can't even like because I'm on that committee. I'm on that one. It's really funny. I don't even remember how it started. And now it's like a fully fleshed thing that's happening.
And that's, and again, for us as an organization, like this is the thing, for us as an organization, that's a benefit, right? we're about promoting and shaping youth voices, but how it's really different for that's not an idea that we drove. It was an idea that the organization drove. It was an idea that some of the young people started to drive, and we've adopted that. Now, we could we could have driven it, but there's something valuable about the idea coming from young people themselves and owning that. And then we have to then have the humility too to be like, well, then that's yours. You tell us what it needs to be. We're not going to completely say you can't do that. We're here to support that. So, um, and maybe we should talk a little bit about how we communicate. Like people are getting, I think, little snippets, Lamissa, from your show. We do pay everyone in the collective. We get funding. Project Rockit gets funding from a range of different sources. So the payments are some of that money's from the Telstra Foundation, who are a bit of a funder who give us money that we have a fair bit of flexibility with. Other funding we get is specifically for projects. So the William Buckland Foundation have funded some stuff where we can do some video resources and things. So we use that money. And in all of our budgets now, we have a line for the collective. We put in a line that says, oh, there's going to need to be $5,000 or $10,000 to cover off payment of young people. So we're just incorporating that in there and saying that has to be covered. So that gives us the flexibility to then have some money to pay for the other things as well, when we come up with other ideas like the blog and those kinds of things. But yeah, we have meetings, but we also have a very dynamic WhatsApp group.
Oh yeah, this is great. Remember when the moon came out? Like, what was it? There was like a super
know.
moon. Yeah. But no, I think it was really interesting when we first started Project Rockit, there was the idea of, okay, we're gonna have to have some form of communication across like a social media platform just to keep everyone in the loop. And WhatsApp was a chosen one. And I think it worked out in the best, like for the best, because in WhatsApp we have a announcement board, we have different like the actual projects, there's like different brackets, and then we have a general conversation. And I think it's the best way that we figured out how to keep everyone in loop. And it's not just about Project Rockit. We celebrate everyone's like achievements. Like every now and then Dan will pop up with something someone's done. And it's really funny because some of the people are a lot of the collective members are younger than me. And so when you've got 15-year-olds telling you that they're talking at Parliament, it's kind of just like, wow, how amazing are the people I'm working with. So it's not just about we're just youth advisors, we're coming here just to talk and then leaving. It's very much this community we've kind of built around each other. And it's really fascinating to see how it continues to grow. Because at the start, it wasn't like this. Because we didn't know each other. And like now, we're in October. Yeah, it's changed heavily. Like the jokes that will come through. Like sometimes we're talking about really serious topics in the Zoom calls, and then you'll just see the chat function talking about what concerts we're going to. Because it's just that it's constantly, and I think that's the best way we've kept each other involved because I want to go to these meetings. I'm excited to go to these meetings. They're not a hassle to go to. And I know it's not just me. Other members take time to go to these meetings because with the flexibility, I think there's this idea that we're not going to go to it. And because there's that flexibility and that community and that trust, we kind of just make time. You know what I mean? It's really fascinating to see what it's like now.
Yeah, and I think it's going to continue to evolve.
Mm.
And I think that's the other thing too. Like working with Project Rockit has been fascinating because we've got that space. It's a smallish organization, in terms of there's about 15 or 16 staff, and a lot of them are reasonably young themselves. Most of them are under 30. And that allows us to go, oh, we don't just have to have meetings with a group of young people over a certain period of time. There's this flexibility to say, what could it be? Like I'm already seeing that the number of projects means that one of the possible movements is say someone like Lamissa and some of those older members that have a bit more confidence and capacity to do things, because we have a membership from age 12 up to 21, 22 at the moment, depending on where people are at and when their birthdays are happening. And that was deliberate. It was deliberate. We had Maxine, one of our Maxine's amazing. Maxine is 14. Maxine has neurons, like 4 neurons firing in different parts of the brain at the same time. And then tries to say all of those ideas simultaneously at once out in the same sentence. But Maxine's application video was very much around saying, "Oh, I'm 14, and I've tried to do, and you just never have young people. You have all these like 17-year-olds and stuff, and we never hear from actual young people. So there was this sort of folks about, yeah, Project Rocket works predominantly in the secondary school space. So really we want to try and make sure we have a cohort that's representative of that. Um, I think I saw someone, Limisa, just asked about the
Oh,
onboarding. Did you want to talk about
oh.
how
I
you
think I have the most feral onboarding process.
oh, hey, stop. That's no, we're in a
Oh, it was so much fun. So I know collective members have come in from like really like youth organized base. They're like, oh, look at this opportunity. I was on my phone 3 o'clock in the morning scrolling through Instagram and I saw an ad. It was probably a week before the due date as well. And I went in, I recorded the video that night. And and so what happened is that the next process was we had to fill up a really little brief form about who we are, and then we put in a 3-minute video. And then I get an email from Dan saying, hey, I'd like to have an interview with you. And so we had an interview, it was like 15 minutes long or something like that. And instantly there was no, I was so nervous going into it. And then all I hear is, hi, my name's Dan. It's really nice to meet you. And I'm like, okay, hi, it's really nice to meet you too. But like from the like get-go, it was really welcoming. Like there was this I know Dan talks about this too, but there was this sense of like knowing. So it felt like I've met him before almost. It was really weird. And it was when we went into these meetings, I think he spoke about, I don't know if he spoke about it in this meeting, but when we went into the meetings for the first time, I was really nervous as well. And because I knew him in the room, I was fine. Like I didn't feel as precious like I didn't know anyone because I'd be meeting all of these people for the first time. But I had this feeling that I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be overwhelmed with all these new people. I can just go into this really easy. So the whole process was pretty straightforward and smooth. But it was just this, I don't know, it was really, I think, very personal, if that makes sense. It was very focused on creating that connection from the start. And I think that's like greatly helped like through for every member. So yeah, it was a really great onboarding process, Dan.
because too, I think the idea was to um the practice, I guess, behind it was this is not it wasn't an interview as much as it was, um, hey, this is who we are, and this is who I am, and this is what we're trying to do. And I'm as interested in having you on this, but you've got to make sure that it's right for you as well. So that a two-way decision-making process. It wasn't
It was
just
very clear. Like there was nothing, I didn't know what I was going. Like I did know, well, that's the wrong way to say it. I did know what I was going into. It was very straight up. Like this is exactly what we're going to do, and this is what the expectations are. Is this okay with you? And obviously it was. So here we are.
yeah. Mandy, you've arrived because you just said, I'll jump in 2 or 3 minutes before to let you know that we got to have questions. And that's great. Like we've been taking questions already as I see them pop up. But
It's just a delight.
go from here.
I think you both should give instruction on public speaking myself. I just like, oh my God, you rock. I'm just here basically to flag our lovely opportunity, handing over now to Jen and Sam to lead the Q&A. And from this point on in the session, you won't see me again. And it will be, well, I'll do the introductions and Sam and Jen will be doing the Q&A. Okay, over to you guys.
Hello. G'day, g'day. Oh, that was so wonderful. I was just like mesmerized by both of you. As Mandy said, like I definitely think you two should do some public speaking training or something because you're just so, both of you, so awesome. And I love what you said, Dan, about it not just being about listening, but about handing over that power and what comes next after listening, like the follow through with action and responding. And Lamissa, I really liked that you highlighted the importance of flexibility because I think that's often overlooked or maybe like a kind of last thought, but I think actually it should be a first thought because it's super crucial when working with young people. Yeah, so insightful. We do have some questions that are coming through the chat, and so if any audience members want to keep posting those questions through the chat, we'll keep an eye on them and ask them for you. But I'll kick things off with our first question. So Project Rockit, how does Project Rockit navigate the challenge of engaging young people in online safety discussions while ensuring the message remains relevant and impactful in today's super fast changing digital environment?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, but look, I think in some ways, there's a couple of levels to that question, right? So, one, we do talk a lot about because one of the remits, like Project Rocket's not just an online safety organization, but that's part of obviously young people's lives. So we do. I think the way that we do it is that we, again, we do it a lot over time. So we've been doing a project called Shaping Our Feeds, which is about young people's experience of the algorithm. So it's talking about what works, what doesn't work. Um, and we've done that over 6 weeks. And we've probably had 2 or 3 meetings a week so that everyone can engage. And we've done that at different times. So some are at 4:30 till 5:30, others are at 7 till 8. It depends on when people are available and what happens. But the safety comes through the time spent and the relationships had and what you find. And let Mr. tell me how you feel about it. But I feel like we start having conversations, but it's almost like you have a conversation one week, you get to go away and it bubbles around in your head and you use your social media and you do stuff. So the next week and the next week and the next week, the conversations just become more complex and sophisticated.
100%. I think the Shaping My Feed's the best example. Like, I remember our first week meeting. To be honest, I had no idea what we were doing getting into it. I'm gonna be like completely forward because I just couldn't understand. It's not my sphere. I don't really do algorithms and stuff like that. So I think at the start of it, our first week, like, I know my videos have even changed. Like, the stuff that I've presented, they've gotten better because now going into, I think week 3 was when I finally understood, okay, that's what we're actually talking about because the meetings we're having, I think all of us were starting to understand. Because I think one of the first things we said is what is the algorithm? And that's really basic. And now we've got conversations around actual representation on social media. How do you manage that? So it's one of those things that, as Jen said, time is really, really important. And I think we're all, because we're young as well, like a lot of us this is our first time in the big world doing big world things. So once you get into that, there's a lot of things we don't know. So by having that time to be able to learn, to be able to go, okay, and grow, I think our meetings have gotten a lot more sophisticated with the conversations we're having. And I think that's really, really important.
And that everyone's perspective is different. But I think there's a very much a sense of we have a range of principles and things that we work to. And one of those is unconditional positive regard, or that idea that we all come to the space with the best intentions. And if someone says the wrong thing or maybe offends someone, they're not meaning to, they're just trying to navigate their way through that. And we work that out. And everyone doesn't always agree, which is great because it's young people. Everyone's got different perspectives, right?
Yeah. Oh, hey, folks. Dan, good to see you again.
Bye.
It's great to meet you. I'm Sam. I go by he and him pronouns, work at YakFlick alongside Jen. I've got a couple of questions for you, Lamissa. Firstly, just reflecting what was in the chat there, one of the last comments is, oh my gosh, Lamissa is such a strong presenter. And I couldn't agree more. You're such a charismatic speaker,
Thank you.
and so interesting to listen to. My question is, a lot of people on the call will be thinking about how they get their opportunities directly to young people and what will engage them in signing up. And I'm wondering, I'm sorry if you said this and I missed it, but how did you find out about the opportunity and what made you want to get involved in it?
So I found it through Instagram. So there was an ad, like I was just scrolling on my phone doing nothing in the morning and I saw it and I was like, okay, I might as well take the chance. I think a lot of the times why people my age probably don't want to engage with these kinds of things is because they've either had prior experience of going to something similar or of the sort and then just felt that they weren't being heard. So I really kind of I took it because I thought it would be it was just the outlines of it just sounded interesting at the time. But going into it, my expectations were not what we have now. I was very much just expecting to here's a couple of questions, answer our questions, and then you go on into the world. I now in Project Rockit, we're very wasn't expecting to be so engaged with it. So I think it's more of a changing the scene. And I think, and it starts with like schools and stuff like that when people are asked to join these bodies. I'm like, for our younger collective members, I'm really, really happy that this was their first opportunity with stuff like this, because it's such a different, I haven't seen it before. Where I know with some of the older members, and it's reflected in some of the conversations we have, a lot of us have been into these scenarios and we don't feel like our voices are worth much. We're kind of just there as a pretty face. So I think it's more changing these kinds of systems and environments and collectives to kind of reflect that we are very important to it and very integral to its existence, and actually taking what we're saying as as very important. So yeah, I think that's one way, like, I guess
Yeah,
I could answer that.
I love it. Yeah, no, I love it.
To give a practice on that, Sam, only a couple of months ago, we started a small group. I offered the opportunity for people to come on and talk about, if we have new members, what would that look like? So we have a group of young people talking about onboarding and how we do that. And one of the pieces of advice they gave was we should actually not just have it on our Instagram, but also the ad thing. So their advice is, if each new project we do, we might put a little call out to try and invite 2 or 3 new people in. And they're like, just do an Instagram. Like, and we've worked out, our social media managers worked out that for a couple of $100, we can probably do a really nice targeted ad that'll get in front of enough young people to give them the opportunity. So,
Yeah, awesome. All right, I'll throw back to Jen.
Thanks, Sam. We've had a question come through the chat here from Catherine. I'm wondering what your biggest learnings are from the program. What have been the key challenges you've had to navigate in building this wonderful space? Do either of you want to jump in first with what you think the biggest learnings from the program has been?
You want to go, Dan? You can go first.
I feel like you've got. I feel like the whole talk was a bit about my learnings and where things are sort of going. But look, I think. Okay, so this is not just the program, but this is my work in this space over time. One thing I want to say is that what you need to know is that I know, people are sort of like, oh, you get the usual faces and things. The collective process and that onboarding and that selection process, I always say, is representative, not competitive. So we weren't just chasing. We want young people who are shy. There is a young woman, Emily, who comes along but never really talks. But then contributes in the WhatsApp and contributes in other ways, and that's fine. Like, we need to make sure that all, not just the confident, I do use Parliament, I do debating kind of vibe comes along. Lemissa, I do want you to tell them about.
Oh yeah,
we'll get to that. So the biggest learning for me, though, is that if you create a safe space, I know everyone says when we do these things, oh, everyone's amazing, young people are amazing. Oh, gee, and Lemissa does. You talk amazingly well and all the rest of it, but every young person, if you give them the opportunity to have a space that they feel safe in where they can contribute, it will happen. It isn't that you're choosing the right young people. It is about the way you shape the space and the way you facilitate that. And it's up to you, Lisa, if you want to share.
All right, yeah. I think using
it's not on me.
Emily's the best example, right? Because Emily does contribute in the WhatsApp and stuff like that. I don't, though. I don't like texting. I'm very terrible when it comes to communicating via anything like that. It's just not. So you're seeing a good side of me talking. But yeah, no, I think what Dan's saying, using Amelia is a great example, because Emily, because she fills in something that I can't give. You know what I mean? And so I think all of the collective members have their great strengths that kind of uplifts another member's weakness. And this is the best example of my weakness she fills in. So I think by having that broad range of people, it's really important. Like, I know Dan made a comment about like all Parliament kids and stuff like that. My biggest thing was it was really interesting coming into this, because a lot of the times when you have these types of collectives and stuff like that, it's usually those kids that are doing it, like the prefects that are coming in, like top of the class. That's usually the demographic. So when I was like in high school and stuff like that, I had a lot of challenges with like academics and stuff. But I love these spaces, but I wasn't allowed into them because I wasn't meeting the requirements that was expected. And I know, and usually it leaves out a lot of people of color, people with disabilities that aren't able to meet these standards set by school systems to join these like facilities. So I think in Project Rockit, there's such a diverse range of people with like such different experiences. And I know when it comes to these experiences, there's usually a conversation of, do you feel tokenized? And I think coming back to the merch story, it's a really great one because, yeah, we all got to chip in and say about merch, but I remember getting a call from Dan going, hey, we're doing beanies. Do you wear beanies? And I'm like, why would you even ask, do I wear beanies? And I hadn't had like thought of the idea that because Dan doesn't have the experience of someone who wears a hijab, he's not aware if that's something I can wear or not. And as a collective member, I think it really speaks to the fact that I wasn't thinking about that this would have been a problem, shows that I'm not coming in just because I'm a person of color who's a Muslim. Like I'm not coming in for that specific category. Um, but it's really, I don't know, it's fascinating. I don't know. It's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah. No, you explained it so well, Amissa. And you just speak so beautifully of like, other members picking up where you might not, like your communication styles are different. And I think you've highlighted something really important, which is we need to make sure we're catering for all different communication styles and all different personalities and all different types of abilities. And because yeah, everyone can contribute meaningfully in many different ways. And it's important that we recognize that and cater for that. I'll hand it over to you, Sam.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on that as well, and the fact that COVID actually helped us think a little bit more creatively about creating groups of young people and not just defaulting to the idea of sitting around a boardroom table and imitating adult defined kind of meeting processes and governance structures. But a lot of people struggle with still maintaining that. Like there's a lot of pressure for people to revert back to that. It's really refreshing to hear how kind of steadfast you've been in that approach and breaking down those expectations and making it as adaptive and flexible for participants as possible. But my actual question is, Lamissa, what was your favorite merchandise? I think everyone wants to know.
The pin. To be fair, the beanie's kind of like solid, but I'm a pin person.
Awesome.
Like it's more like it's a lapel pin, and that's deliberate. So we now have those, and the idea is staff members and collective members will have the pin. So it's just that nice little here's here's the thing that is a representative of you. And if you go to an event or on your school blazer, because that's the thing to
Oh, you're part of the in crowd. It's like a sort of
it is a little bit, yeah, why not? But everyone can be part of the in crowd. We just
Oh yeah, we also got lollies too. That was pretty sweet. As a part of the merch, so I like that as well. That was pretty great.
branded lollies.
Yes, of course. Only the best.
Well, no, I know they weren't. It was just I self-branded with a little because I've got a stamp, but that I just love mailing stuff to people because when we're online, right, and we don't meet in person, it's nice to get something tangible. The level of like I wrote a letter to every single person too because I wanted to just highlight who they were from my perspective in their involvement. So that level of personalization, our practice with working with human beings should be to see each other. And the systems we work in don't allow us to see each other enough. And managing risk is really important, and keeping children safe and young people is really important. But unfortunately, we have gone too far in one direction, and that impacts on our ability to have the kinds of relationships that we need to have to really effectively sometimes support children and young people. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Done.
Sorry, I've got one more quick question before I throw back to you, Jen. I'm thinking about that kind of that diversity within the group and the different communication styles, and it can be much easier to kind of recognize and celebrate those that are kind of extroverted and forward and speaking up. How do you recognize and celebrate those who are maybe a little quieter or a little less front and center with some of the work?
I think that's a little bit on me. Lamissa probably sees that as well because I'm the one person. Oh, well, I also have Amelia who works with us, who's a young person herself who's 23, who also sits on Origin's Youth Advisory Council, but also happens to be an employee of Project Rockit. So sort of works with the collective as well and supports me. And so our job is to do that work. So that's we engage with everyone in different ways. So there's one thing, I've got a Google document that's called Our Collective Achievements. And whenever anyone tells me they're doing something good, that's there. So, and that can be, hey, I did the Raise Your Voices thing and someone's reading my speech out in Parliament, but it's also, hey, Emily and Harrison are both performing in their school musicals this week. How great is that? So it's just when people mention things in passing, we share them with the group and we acknowledge that. And in the final products, like the Shaping Our Feeds also has this big research piece. So we also, at every single point along the way, those that have been involved, we make sure everyone's name is there, that it's all there. We haven't touched on yet that idea too of supporting people in different ways. Like we pay everyone. We pay them for every hour that they work. And we do that because we live in a society that values things through money, but that's also not enough. We need to pay through opening, like to giving these young people a sense of what we're working in. So even though you might not understand budgets or you might not do that, where's the level at which we can open the door a little bit and shine the light on saying this is how it works. Having Larissa come in and do this is part of that. Didn't you? You were in the before.
Oh yeah, and
you were in the background room seeing what happened, and we forget that that's a new thing, right? That's a good experience. I hope it was a good experience to have.
it's a great experience.
Thank you very much to you both. I think I'm handing back to Mandy. The boss is back.
I think you all guys are bosses myself because I'm very in awe, frankly. I thank you so much, Dan, Lamissa, Sam, and Jen. This has been, frankly, a highlight for our whole session, and I just can't wait to delve more into what you've suggested in terms of reading and exposure, but also work more with you. Just amazing. Thank you so much. I'm sure you'll have lots of people reaching out because that's the first thing I want to do.